years ago.
LA, Tito, everywhere.
Everywhere you look, they're saying about it. So glad I'm home.
Very well, Chris. How are you?
That's the whole point of this job.
Fantastic.
Put ourselves out of the job.
Exactly. It's kind of like raising kids. Like, can we just say,
Well, that's true for your kids too.
that's true, 37, 42, and I'm still, you know, I'm happily settled.
I think my mother.
We have done just all of them. We're never gonna crash.
I know, well, you know, it is amazing. As everyone.
Are you talking about people summer reading signs? Yeah. But the changes haven't
Next to
it was a wasn't like, so they were just trying to.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you. I was just telling Senator Barrett that we have to have him to all our meetings so that we can get this kind of turnout. But I'm not sure he'll have the time. As we know, things are continuing. If you haven't signed in when you came in on your way out or after, while we're doing some schmoozing time, just sign it. We want to know who all came. I want to thank the policemen out there and the town for building the police station with this community room. This is an incredible room. It's the first time I've been in it. It's got all kinds of high-techy things. Apparently you can do a hybrid meeting here, which everybody's been asking for, so this seems to be the place to come for. So maybe we'll consider that for some of our events that could be done hybrid, where people want to come in and people want to listen. Thank you for all attending the annual meeting for LexCAN. This is our first real formal annual meeting and we're pretty excited. The first 15 minutes, if I can talk fast enough, will be on the business of LexCAN, and then we're gonna switch to Senator Barrett. And then we'll have questions and answers. So, I'm Ricky Papo. I'm the current chair of LexCAN. In an escalating, I'm sorry, I'm gonna read because otherwise I'm gonna forget a million things. In an escalating climate crisis whose impacts are increasingly impossible to ignore, LexCAN dedicated its time and resources in 2024 to educating and rallying the Lexington community to proactively meet the climate challenge head-on, both in their private lives and through aggressive advocacy for local and state initiatives to mitigate and adapt to the causes and manifestations of this crisis. LexCAN is in its 20th year of doing this work. Oh boy, if only 20 years ago. We've been advocates to address climate change and taking action, and if you can see one of these, we didn't print enough for everybody, but just grab one, leave them around so people can see them. The front page is our accomplishments for 2024. On the back is our financials, which we'll get to in a minute. So we've been taking action, and if you look at the poster board over there, after we're done, you'll see in the center screen is some of the work that has been done by the town. So LexCAN has worked with a lot of the town offices. I see Ms. Maggie Purd just arrived. Hi, Maggie. Our sustainability and resilience officer, who's had a lot to do with everything that went on in that center panel. It's very impressive. The town has been doing some great work with lots and lots of collaborators. I want to highlight our overwhelming success in our tagline, which is educate, advocate, collaborate. These verbs are in the active voice because our work is intended to encourage and engage residents, landlords, businesses to take action. We want to lead to action. Action will mitigate the effects of climate change while also adapting to the changes that are already here and coming. In addition to mitigation and adaptation, I believe that LexCAN also works to build a mycelium network with partners that also have the goal of reversing the damage that has been done and regenerating our ecosystems so that we, our children, and our grandchildren will have a livable planet. If we stop burning fossil fuels, stop filling our air with air pollution, we stop the damage and we can stop the damage and eventually reverse some of the effects. We need healthy communities, forests, oceans, flora and fauna, and watersheds to make all of this possible. We know from various leaders like Bill McKibben and Catherine Hayhoe that the most important thing we can do to combat climate change is to talk about it. Have you ever been in a conversation with a friend, a neighbor, a family, and the topic of climate change came up and they said, I'm worried? What did you say? How did you answer them? We need to have these conversations with everybody. Everybody needs to feel they have agency in solving this problem. While global issues can be overwhelming, we, each of us individually, are an influential part of this mycelium network. We're interconnected residents of the planet Earth. Each one of us can play a role in changing the course of climate change. Every individual action counts. Each time you burn less oil, compost your food waste, plant pollinators and edible vegetation, plant trees, walk, bike, or take public transportation, you are taking climate action. Thank you for every action you've done. Is there more you'd like to do? We can work together and figure out a way forward. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the business part of the meeting. So first I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has donated to LexCAN this year. That money has all contributed to us being able to accomplish what we've accomplished in 2024. And I want you to feel that we maximize the impact of your donations. 5 years ago, LexCAN created a strategic plan for 2021 to 2024. We are happy to report the plan was a success. We've accomplished most of its goals, and it was transformative to the organization in many ways. We are engaging members. We are going to go forward with our next strategic plan, and some of you may get contacted to answer some questions. We're trying to engage the community and helping us set the stage for where do we go from here. We know we're not done, obviously. If you have any ideas on things you'd like LexCAN to work on, or maybe the town to work on to address climate change, we'll put out some markers and you can write some things down on that pad. We will take everybody's idea seriously. If you're really passionate about it, leave your name so we can reach out to you and work with you on this. Our work is guided by our board of directors. We became a nonprofit in 2024, which was pretty exciting. It means we can get grants. It means we can do a lot more with thank you. So now we have a board of directors, and I actually, it's not in these notes and nobody knows this, but I think I want the board of each one of the current board of directors to raise their hand, except, well, I'm not sure. I'm riffing here. So I'm just going to point out we have Elizabeth Bornhoft and Charlie Moore. Charlie is our polar bear, if you've ever seen the polar bear. Charlie is the man behind the polar bear. Charlie and Elizabeth have been with LexCAN since day one. They were part of the beginning of LexCAN. Marcia Jens over here, Fran Ludwig over here, looking around. Janice over here. I'm sorry. I should have made you all sit together. Janice over here.
Jane Krieger?
Nope, Jean is not on our board.
She should be.
So
There's an idea.
we have, yeah, I know, Jean is so bored. She's just looking for more to do. We have Kavitha, Andy, and Rachel, but I'm gonna get to them in a second. And Mary Yardley over there. So we meet as a board once a month. We used to meet every other week to discuss what we want to do, how we want to spend the money that we did have, do we want to raise more money? And we have 5 operating committees, and any you don't have to be on the board to be in a committee. And in fact, it's nicer when we get more non-board people, because we meet all the time on our committees. So we have advocacy, communication, programming, finance, and membership. Have you ever heard from our advocacy committee?
Yes.
Senator Barrett?
Quite a bit.
Good, then we're doing our job. We also, in 2024, realized we needed more board members. So we voted in Kavitha, I meant to ask you how to pronounce your last name
That was
before.
good, Ricky. No worries.
Venkatesan. Andy joined, and Rachel Summers. We invited them to be part of the board. The board voted them in, and in a second, we're gonna get to officially voting them in and hearing from them. But I do want to say a very quick goodbye to our member Mary Yardley, who is moving to Maine. That is the only reason she's leaving us. I know that to be true. Mary's done an amazing job over the past 8 years. She's been our communications chair, and when you get your newsletters, it's because Mary sat there and made that happen. Maine is lucky to get you.
And we're coming to visit.
Okay, so now I'm gonna ask the 3 new board members to just say a quick sentence about themselves, and then I'm just gonna ask you all whether you approve us having them be part of the board. Kavitha?
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be nominated for the board. I'm a Lexington resident for 12 years, career scientist in the biopharma industry, and sustainability is my second passion. So environment and health is something that I'm really interested in. And I spent my time in my earlier part of my life really focusing on my career and my family, and I was like, what am I gonna give back to the town? This is an amazing town. And a lot of momentum about sustainability, a lot of good like-minded folks. So I feel like this is the right time for me to get involved and do my part to think about how we can make Lexington even more sustainable than it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Andy?
Hello, my name is Andy Joint. I've been a Lexington resident for about 3 years. I've been an environmentalist, I think, since my childhood, but up until I found LexCAN, I only ever acted as an individual in pursuit of my environmentalism. And as I got to know LexCAN more and more, I realized how empowering it is to take collective action to help the environment and battle climate change. And that's only drawn me in more and more. So happy to be joining the board.
And Rachel?
I'm Rachel. I'm not gonna stand up. I'm not sure how long I've lived in Lexington, at least a decade. I sort of came to this group via the green team composting teams at the schools, and was just so impressed by how this, like, I don't know, I'll call us a scrappy group of like just enthusiastic people who are willing to kind of stand and do something different could have such like actual measurable impact, and was looking for more opportunities, especially learning about how, you know, the impact that local government, local advocacy can have, especially where, you know, the national government is yo-yoing around and who knows what's going to happen there, but we can kind of keep things moving here in really meaningful ways. So
Thank you to the 3 of you. Show of hands to have Kavitha, Andy, and Rachel join the LexCAN board. Yay. I'd also like to introduce our newest person with LexCAN. We've hired Esther June, who met you at the door.
Hey.
Esther is a clean energy advocate, so she's going to be continuing to work to educate the community on how to electrify your home, your ride, everything. And so I'm glad you all sort of got to meet Esther. Esther will be organizing our sustainability fair, which is happening on March 22nd, so mark your calendars. And then just a little bit on 2025, so you know where we're going. We'll continue to do the same things we've been doing. Like I said, we have a sustainability fair on the 22nd. On March, we're sort of doing a pre-Earth Day. I know April's gonna be quite busy in Lexington. You may have heard of something going on here. On April 17th, we're having a talk with Casey Thornborough. I may be pronouncing that. He's a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and a climate scientist, and he's going to talk to us about indigenous care of the land. So that we will be co-sponsoring with the Field and Garden Club and the library. So it's great when the groups come together around a shared interest. We're gonna do a book group. We're gonna read Ministry for the Future, which while it's science fiction, it does seem to get people motivated. So it's good science fiction, and he does a lot of research. We'll be talking about food and climate, and we're gonna, now that we can meet in person, we're gonna get back to our in-person discussions where we just brainstorm, what should we do, what do we need to do, et cetera. So I'm gonna turn the meeting over to Charlie Moore, who's head of our finances, and he will do a brief overview before we get to Senator Barrett.
It's great to see so many people turn out to hear the financial report. I'll try to. The good news is we had a strong year this year, and actually had a surplus of $5,000. If you look at the back of your sheet, you'll see what I'm talking about. Our revenue, the key parts of revenue are an arrangement we have with Homeworks, where they provide us with a fee every time they do a home audit. And that has been really helpful. Also, we had some grant money that Ricky and I think Marcia worked with you on that? Grant?
Maggie and
Yes.
Cindy.
Right.
Cindy's not here, but Maggie, Cindy and I.
Cindy's here.
Cindy's here. I miss her.
They had received a $30,000 grant a couple years ago, and we got the last part of it, $9,000 last year. So that gave us about $29,000 of revenue. And our expenses, we had, the big expense was sending out a mailing to all of Lexington.
Yep.
Talking about a variety of our programs. Other than that, the staffing is our key challenge going forward in terms of the clean heat outreach specialist and our clean energy advocates. It's those labors which are our main thing. I see an interesting typo here where it says bank charges outreach specialist. We do not have an outreach specialist for bank charges. To be clear, it's the outreach specialist relates to clean heat.
Okay.
So that's the good news. We have $43,000 in cash in checking account and an investment fund. So that leaves us pretty strong right now. The bad news is looking at the proposed budget for next year. And we want to keep doing the programs we're doing, and we particularly want to keep that clean energy advocate and our outreach works going full speed. And right now, if you look at the budget, we don't have enough revenue to cover all of that. So we're projecting a budget loss of about $11,000. Now, we're hoping that maybe through grants and the fabulous donations that people in Lexington have provided, which really helped us last year, may help us to close this gap. But in essence, that's where we stand. I guess I'll take questions unless we want to charge ahead. But I think it would be helpful to get a motion to accept the financials and approve the budget if anyone feels so inspired.
Make a motion, we accept the financials and approve the budget.
So
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's one. Thank you, Mike.
You owe me.
you don't have the budget for it.
All All right. Perhaps at the end, people can approach me with any questions on this. But I think we want to charge ahead and really hear from Mike. Mike, I think the first time we met was 2012 when you were elected.
Yeah,
And,
that's true.
At that point, you told me you couldn't really even mention climate change at the State House, and that
Yeah.
you really needed a movement to get it forward. And now, what you're doing
did it.
is absolutely fantastic. Instead of whispering, you're out front leading it. So we're gonna turn over to Mike right now, and then Liz has a presentation for Mike that she'll be talking to.
After you're done. Don't hurry though.
Thank you.
Well,
Mike.
thank you, Elizabeth, Charlie, Ricky, everyone. I'm going to stand, is that okay? I'm tempted to take your inspiration, and I'm gonna take a picture of all of you, because why not?
You should do it as a selfie.
My wife and I have just returned from the Galapagos, so for the first time, and I'm very proud of myself, I got into the habit of taking pictures, something I had neglected to do for roughly 70 years. I'm totally into it now.
If you turn around, you can take a selfie.
Now, one thing I can't do, but I'm gonna try it, is take a selfie. Charlie Baker, I used to watch him take selfies everywhere he went, and he was the most popular governor in the United States, so I'm gonna start right here.
Want me to take it for you?
Or you could do that too, yeah.
Let's get the whole group. Smile, everyone. There we go.
Thank you, Charlie. Glad you spared me from having to demonstrate my selfie chops. It would have been very deficient. I did, my wife and I did go to the Galapagos, one of those proverbial trips of a lifetime in December. And it was fantastic, but I can tell you that part of the experience, well, it began when we were driving in. We had a car driving us into, because it was connected to the boat we were going to go on, drive us in from the Quito airport to the city. It's a long drive, about an hour. And it was before Christmas and Hanukkah, before New Year's, obviously. The city was lit up brilliantly. It's a very Catholic place, as you might imagine. So very, very, very Christmassy, which a little put off for my Jewish wife, just a little bit, but she was a good sport about it. In any event, we were driving into the city, and the entire place suddenly went dark at 8 o'clock. I mean, an entire city turned off the lights. Turns out that the glaciers are melting up in the Andes. Ecuador is dependent for 70% of its electricity generation on hydro dams, and the hydro dams don't have enough water behind them. And so Ecuador, the capital, the entire country, in fact, has rolling blackouts, except for the hotels hosting tourists. They have generators, and of course, the boats you travel on are quite comfortable as well. But otherwise, if you're Ecuadorian, you're in deep trouble. And it was a reminder that this climate stuff that LexCAN's helping us to confront locally, of course, is worldwide, and it's very, very scary. But I don't need to tell any of you folks that. We have managed, because we're insisting in Massachusetts on responding, we have managed to pass 3 major climate bills in as many 2-year sessions. And I was the Senate's point person. I'm happy and relieved to say on all 3. The third one, which took us forever in 2024 and kicked up a lot of publicity about how the legislature was dysfunctional and wasn't doing its work on time. Believe me, I would have been happy to have done our work on time, but what the House was telling me at the time was you get nothing. Nothing on Massport, nothing on a sort of careful managed retreat from natural gas, nothing to improve EV charging. You get nothing except a kind of bare bones siting and permitting piece, which is very important, but only part of what you were interested in as climate activists and what the Senate was interested in as well. So we were presented on July 31st with a skinny bill in the parlance, an absolutely minimalist response to well, the existential crisis of our time. We declined that skinny bill, held out for months, got the crap kicked out of us by the press and by everyone else for not doing our business on time, but wound up finally with a very, very strong response to the climate issue on a number of fronts. It only sets a kind of floor for where we need to go next. Each of these bills has built on one another, but it was critical to get this third one in place so that we can figure out what to do in the age of Trump. That's a game changer, as they say. It does mean that all of us have to steel ourselves to absorb some real punishment in terms of retreat on the federal level. But they can't really stop. I mean, even Trump is term limited, and last time we checked, climate change isn't. Climate change is going to continue long after Trump is gone. 4 years will be over like that. And these issues are going to continue to press, and we all know that. So that sort of gives us our resolve, and I know I'm speaking to people who are absolutely as determined as I am. This last bill, as long as I'm referencing it, was the one where you guys, where LexCAN and other climate activists really did play a critical role. You were very important in 2021 and then in 2022, 23. But this time there would have been nothing but a skinny bill, but for you, because the governor, for very different reasons, decided to give in to a lot of pressure from the House and settle for a very modest product. The House, for a whole bunch of reasons, wanted not to go very far. Again, the press focused on the squabble and not on the substance, which was inconvenient for me and for the Senate. But the grassroots really kicked into gear. And what happened was that after we blew past this deadline, and it is regrettable that we did it because it does sap confidence in government. So it's not as if it was a good thing. It was just our only choice at the moment. But when we blew past it, and everyone, it seemed, wanted to do as little as possible because that's what the House was insisting upon, and they were holding up everything. A number of us had to turn to you guys, and there really are about climate activists live everywhere, but there are about 30 communities in the vanguard who have critical mass, and Lexington has really led the way. Sustainable Middlesex, something that Charlie and Elizabeth and Ricky have been working on for years, began here and has radiated out to surrounding towns. This now was the moment where somebody had to weigh in, because inside the building, the inside baseball game was all about capitulating, stop holding out. You folks really started to direct some criticism toward the House, which on this issue, not on every issue, but on this issue is more conservative, and even toward the governor, who seemed to be anguished and to be giving up. And if you hadn't generated a lot of mail and a lot of phone calls and text, whatever you did during August and September, the tide would not have turned. At some point, and you'd think that I would know what happened, but actually these things are always imponderable, even when you're kind of up close. I can tell you that the House was my colleague Jeff Roy, leading the House negotiators, was an adamant no on anything having to do with constraining the growth of gas, anything having to do with going against Massport, until he was a yes. And it really was binary. There was a red light for weeks, and then for reasons that only a few people in the House, it's not an incredibly grassrootsy kind of place, only a couple of people in the House could explain, the red light that had lingered for weeks turned green. And I got a call, and from my friend in the house who said, "Okay, what do you want?" And I said, "Well, you know what I want. We've been talking about this for a week. We've been talking about this for a month." He said, "Well, you've got it." And then things went very clearly. I wish I could say it was brilliant negotiating. I haven't a clue what happened exactly. But here's where we're facing going forward. In the teeth of a lot of blowback we're going to get nationally. It is going to inflict real pain. Right now, the best guess is that offshore wind is gone, or at least mothballed for 4 years. That's a huge blow to clean energy planning in Massachusetts, and I only cite that to demonstrate that this is going to be a very, very difficult 4 years. But there happened to be a headline in today's front page of today's business section of the New York Times, which I brought with me, because it's food for thought. The headline is, "Trump can slow but not stop EVs," experts say. And really, that's the truth, the inconvenient truth if you're Donald Trump. He can slow climate work, but he can't stop us, and he can't stop it. We've got to respond because something much more powerful than him is otherwise staring us in the face and our kids and our grandkids in the face as well. So we're going to keep working, and the question is tactically, though, and strategically, how can we work when this guy is in a position to inflict major pain? Well, of course, I don't know exactly what to do because a lot depends on what he does beginning less than a week from today, right?
Right.
He's inaugurated on Monday. He's promising, and this is in the vernacular, this is a buzzy idea. He's promising a lot of day one
Right.
executive orders, right? You guys have, there may be in the first week hundreds of these. It'll take us a while to sort through them, but he promises that many of them are going to be directed against offshore windmills and maybe against the electrification of transportation as well. So we're going to have to pick our way. We're going to have to take a look at what he's able to do quickly and what he instead can only do more slowly, and then plot our responses. Preliminarily, though, I hope that a number of us will think about a number of potential replies. Take the clean energy piece. If it's true that offshore wind farms are in deep trouble, I suspect they are. And the way I think this will work isn't that he will manage to do something on day one, although he will certainly do some things. Instead, the private sector, the folks who are, building these things, are going to take note of the likely risk he imposes on their financing. And they are going to decide, as they've already started to do, right, in the case of New York and New Jersey, to pull out on their own in anticipation of his being, in the end, too tough to overcome. You know, you've got a limited number, you've even got, as you guys know, a limited number of big barges that can tote these huge components of a given turbine out to sea. Those boats function in a kind of worldwide market of their own. Right now, they're reserved to spend 6 months off the coast of Massachusetts, and maybe after that into the Gulf of Maine. But the worldwide market is there, and if they can respond to a higher bidder somewhere else, and they have plausible grounds for backing out of a commitment here because Trump has caused so much trouble, they will literally turn around and steam somewhere else. So these logistics challenges that the private sector piece involve is one reason why this stuff could start with a statement or two from Trump and then snowball quickly in a bad direction. What would we do if my worst fears, the ones I've just described, come to pass? Well, we've got to pivot toward the sector that actually generates today much more clean energy than offshore wind, and that's solar. Right now, the amount of solar production in Massachusetts, and in the country for that matter, but certainly in Massachusetts, it dwarfs the amount of megawatts we get from the few turbines that are actually turning off the coast of Cape Cod. And we've actually kind of neglected solar because there are political reasons for that too, but now's the time to refocus. One reason you've heard so much about offshore wind and relatively so little about solar is because, well, offshore wind is big. It's like a traditional power plant. It's mass in terms of the number of megawatts that one farm, for example, could generate. That critical mass attracts a AFL-CIO. The jobs there, because it's a big construction project, basically, can be unionized, and there can be project labor agreements to guarantee union wages. But that also tempts the AFL-CIO to ignore solar, which is truly distributed, as they say, a distributed energy resource. Offshore wind is not distributed, it's centralized, practically speaking. Solar, truly distributed, truly decentralized, tough to organize, lots of mom and pop shops putting solar on your roof, for example. So it's a different and a tough organizing challenge. For a whole bunch of reasons, the Healy folks, understandably wanting to work with the AFL, have gone really deep into wind, neglected solar. We're gonna have to pivot and go to plan B. And this means, in my neighborhood here in town, I've got solar panels and I can point to 2 or 3 neighbors, but that's it. There are a lot of south-facing roofs. Solar, I don't need to tell you guys, the payback is much better than any other clean energy investment to your house other than weatherization. And yet most folks have busy lives and they just haven't gotten around to putting up solar panels. Again, someone else can help me out here, but the payback return on investment is still probably 5 or 6 years, after which you're running the black. And yet there's what do you think, Cindy?
A little bit more than that, but not too much.
Okay. And yet there's very little solar. So a real, and I don't know, you can't force people to put on solar, although we have that conversation. You can, a new construction, you can compel solar, but I'm talking about retrofitting. So we've got to somehow, it's a marketing campaign, right? You've got to normalize putting solar on your roof, even though a lot of other things are going on in your lives. You've got kids, you've got parents, you've got spouses, you've got jobs, you're exhausted. It's one more thing to think about. Somehow we've got to put rooftop solar closer to people's decision-making core. And then you've got the ground-mounted stuff, really dicey. Western Mass, the greenest communities in the Berkshires and in the Pioneer Valley are now resisting more ground-mounted solar, which is where the utility scale or the big scale can be attained, right? They're really fighting it. I mean, the most liberal members of the Massachusetts Senate from Western Massachusetts are now ambivalent about more solar. So, but on the other hand, we did pass the siting and permitting piece, remember? And it really does enable us to site clean energy projects with less capacity on the part of the local communities to say no. That's a tough trade-off. It's delicate. There are some things we were able to give local communities. We're going to fund their participation in the siting process. Small towns that couldn't afford a lawyer otherwise, we're going to let them be equal partners with equal firepower at these siting conversations. That's very important. We accent in the siting and permitting bill community benefits agreements so that you negotiate with these developers to get a lot for your town if you're going to give them another ground-mounted solar farm out west. So we're taking note of people's legitimate beefs and still trying to build more of the stuff because we have to. Wind is in trouble. So I hope that we can see the Healy folks and everyone else pivot a little and really go after solar in all its dimensions, whether it's on the ground or in your roof or possibly on more canopies over parking lots. But that's the clean energy piece, because you need clean energy in order to, well, electrify transportation without using dirty electrons powering all those electric vehicles. And here I can tell you again, there's something a little out of whack. Just as we over-focused on offshore wind for understandable political reasons, but still, we're also over-focusing on fast chargers on interstates. which is where the feds have been most interested. Biden, to his credit, funded something in a bipartisan infrastructure bill, not the IRA, but a companion to it, that provides a lot of money. However, I don't need to tell you guys, 80, 90%, 95% of all the charging a would-be owner of an EV would do in order to address range anxiety or anything else would take place at home. I mean, almost all the trips, with the occasional out-of-state trip in the summer maybe, almost all the trips you would take in an EV that might make you anxious are trips that you take every day and that are well within the range of an EV to enable you to cover, right? And we talk about charging in the home. Well, actually not much compared to charging on the Mass Pike, which was a legitimate gripe that people had that I think we've addressed. I can tell you more tomorrow. I'll be on the Mass Pike myself. But we haven't talked about home charging, and in particular, we haven't talked about so-called level 1 home charging. A level 2, which is what I've got, cost me a couple of $1,000, and it'll charge my Kia in about 6 hours from a dead start. In other words, from a dead battery in my driveway, which is super convenient compared to schlepping to a gas station. But a level 1 charger, which doesn't require you to rewire your house, right? It's 120 volts, not 240. It's essentially the same electric cord you'd use to run a vacuum cleaner. Tell me if I'm right about that.
Wow.
A vacuum cleaner, does that work? Okay. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to lie, but in the interest of a good story, but it's nice to fact check it every once in a while. So a level 1 charger is something you can essentially plug in. It's a 12-hour deal, not a 6-hour deal, but everyone can afford to charge up an EV once we make them affordable. And I think the Chinese, even with tariffs, are going to help us do that. The range anxiety, talking about level 1 slow charging as something that doesn't require rewiring and that anyone can do is a big deal for 95% of the travel you'd hope to do in a car of any kind. There's no talk in Massachusetts about the affordability of level 1 charging. There's a significant amount of talk about this intermediate, this level 2 piece, but as I say, that's going to set you back if you have to rewire your house, and we did have to rewire ours, put in a new electric panel, and then the charger itself. Yeah, that's $3,000 or $4,000 that a lot of people don't have. So we need to talk about EV charging in Massachusetts, which isn't the fancy fast charging on the interstate, but the stuff you need to get to work or to drive your kids to school every day. And we never talk about it. So part of the pivot in the Trump era, again, with respect to the electrification of transportation, is something like that, which brings us to the electrification of homes and buildings. That's a tough one, more expensive than dealing with the charging issue. And but it's where LexCAN shines and where Massachusetts is doing very well. Of course, this town is also a leader statewide in terms of dealing with transit-oriented development. Leaving aside the debate about exactly what the build-out should be or could be, the important thing to note is that if you want to deal with climate change, probably the single most effective strategy you can encourage over the next 3 or 4 years is to build housing, well, in a town like this one, right? Because we need to preserve the beauty of Lexington or Concord or Lincoln or Arlington or Belmont or Cambridge or Somerville, great neighborhoods in which to live, Boston, and still somehow fit more people in, because you don't want people commuting from central Massachusetts into Lexington to take a life sciences job. That's a long commute. That's very polluting. So this housing piece, which is important in its own right, is really a climate piece. We've got to figure out, consonant with our values, how to be happy with more neighbors per square mile, so that people don't have to drive as long as they otherwise might in order to earn a livelihood. And that housing piece, which I think is going to go well after the SJC decision of a week or so ago, is critical just as climate strategy. But there are going to be setbacks at every point. We are going to, I think, continue to green the grid. That would be the solar piece. Green transportation, that's among other things, level 1 charging. We're going to continue to get heat pumps into people's homes, but there are going to be setbacks too. The important thing is that we just continue, especially on the housing piece, the heat pump piece, continue to experiment and to innovate. In this last climate bill, the one that was so difficult to pass, we really took on this issue of, again, how do you manage a smart retreat from gas so that there's room, so to speak, room of every kind, including economic room, for heat pumps instead. There was a time, it was probably in the 50s and 60s, when the right to natural gas kind of struck people as an important right, just as rural electrification itself, right, whether supported by fossil fuel combustion or not, was a right and was critical at one point for towns in rural America. We, earlier legislators built into Massachusetts state law favored treatment for fossil fuels. There is a right to get, or there was a right to have natural, to have natural gas delivered to your home, even if the utility for some reason didn't want to build a service line to your home. Section 92 of Chapter 164 said, hey, you can petition the DPU to get that rascally natural gas utility to give you gas. Now, there was no right in statute to stay warm. There was no right in statute to have a safe form of heat. It was explicitly instead gas alone, with no mention of electrification as a potential alternative. So the radical idea that occasioned such resistance in the House was that we should give the DPU the opportunity to say a reasoned no to a petition to expand natural gas if an affordable, safe, and effective alternative is available, and in light of our need to realize reductions in emissions and to satisfy the limits and sublimits that we've now set as a state on our way to net zero by 2050. Just creating the option for the DPU to take a look at your situation and say, we've got an alternative for you that works, that won't endanger the planet and our emissions objectives. That's what the House was fighting. That's what was too radical, giving the DPU discretion, basically, and taking away this right to gas that had been embedded in law for about 40 years. There was another provision, and I won't regale you with too many examples, but Section 32 of Chapter 164 gives the gas utilities the right to continue to expand their gas markets, and it was an aggressive right. Again, embedded in state statute and very explicitly having to do with gas, not with the provision of heat or the business of keeping people warm in general. So again, we had to propose an amendment not to take away the right of a gas utility to expand markets, but to say that any further expansion has to be done only after the regulatory agency, this Department of Public Utilities I mentioned, thinks about our climate goals, asks whether whether market expansion would subvert them, and again, considers whether there's alternative ways to keep people warm and to keep people safe. None of these things are academic. Recent court decisions through the game in favor of the gas utilities because of these provisions that I'm invoking or mentioning to you. So we had to change them because in very recent years, the gas utilities have expanded their market using these statutes. It was terrific that in the end, we managed to make these changes. And I do want to talk about the Massport piece as well. In the State House, Massport really does have a reputation as being very tough. I mean, very strong. They seem to be untouchable. And the reason there was kind of a backstory here reinforcing this reputation is because they had dealt for years with East Boston. And they had, if you talk to East Bostonians, managed to pretty much get their way. And there were a lot of angry people and smart people in East Boston, but this fight has been going on since the 50s, and they would tend to see Massport prevail. And during that time, its enabling statute passed by the legislature in 1956 had never been touched. And as you might imagine, it basically said, Massport, your job is to promote regional economic prosperity and create jobs, and that's pretty much it. Changing that statute, that enabling statute, to compel Massport to think about more things and to make them all on a par with economic prosperity, which is important, was, I thought, a useful thing to do. So, you know, I wrote some language that said, attend to economic prosperity, attend to job creation for the region, but also attend to reductions in emissions attributable to greenhouse gas. Put that into the balance, so we can't dictate a particular decision for you, but now you can be sued if you seem to be giving lip service only to the emissions piece. There are people who are going to test you. If you think this is a joke and you're going to continue with business as usual or insist that you've been compliant and mindful of emissions all along, if you think this is the way you're going to deal with this new edict from the legislature, you really are going to trigger suits that are going to slow you down. Because now you're tasked with a balancing that you've never been asked to do before. Coincidentally, tomorrow, and it is just a coincidence, Rich Davey, the new executive director of Massport, is coming in to see me. And I don't know what he's going to say. This obviously has to do with Hanscom. And my feeling that a red line has been crossed in terms of decent judgment. I mean, what's going on, what's proposed for Hanscom in terms of these private jets is morally disgusting.
Yes.
It's not just bad for the climate. It really is beyond the pale. He's a new guy. He was here once. He went to New York. He ran an important part of New York mass transit in recent years. He's a decent guy. He's also got still Charlie Baker's board of directors telling them, I don't know what they're telling him, but I don't expect that he's going to be a pushover by any means. He has to realize that when the legislature changes something that hasn't been altered since 1956, it's saying two things. There is the very specific legislative intent involved in the wording, and I've described it. But there's also the general legislative intent being expressed here, which is that you've got to change. Business as usual will not suffice. So I need him to be clear that the legislature is issuing a general judgment about Massport's behavior, as well as making very specific changes to its enabling statute. Well, all of this is by way of saying that there's lots of hope. We're going to face, in some ways, a grim 4 years nationally. There's plenty of work to be done. And the grassroots, the folks who are just worried for their families and for their neighbors and for the kind of the world you folks, you made a difference in the last 6 months. You turned things around. And all of us have got to figure out what the next wave of work to be done is and do that again. So thank you very much.
Oh my God. Thank you, Mike, for motivating us, for being our motivational beacon, actually. We're going to let Mike take a few questions, but first I would like to embarrass him a little bit, if he can stand it. The board submitted some comments about you, and I compiled them. It's very brief,
Okay.
but I compiled them into a little message, which I don't want to mess up, so I'm going to refer to it. Senator Barrett. You've been an extraordinary champion and state leader on climate initiatives. Your deep understanding of the science, your ability to develop strong, reasoned positions, and your advocacy, spoken plainly and forcefully, as we just witnessed, have been invaluable in the face of misinformation, political quagmires, and apathy. Your persistence has ensured that Massachusetts continues to lead in addressing the climate crisis. We're fortunate to have a senator who not only shows up at local events such as Discovery Day and LexCAN meetings and Sustainable Middlesex presentations, but also engages deeply with constituents, discussing the issues that impact our community. Your in-depth knowledge of policy and your willingness to explain the reasoning behind your positions are inspiring. Your responsiveness to questions and concerns, including those from climate activists,
You're a quiet bunch.
reflects your dedication to collaboration and your thoughtful leadership. It goes on just a little bit more. Are you embarrassed yet?
Yeah.
Okay, your commitment to promoting effective climate policies while considering the financial impact on low and middle income residents, as seen in the recent climate bill, sets a high standard for public service. From the time we first discussed climate change in 2012 with you, when the issue barely registered in the State House, to the progress we've made today, your perseverance has been pivotal. Thank you, Mike, for your vision, your leadership, your steadfast commitment to ensuring a sustainable future for Massachusetts
Thank you
and
very
beyond.
Well, I'm gonna give you
Accept gifts, but this is just a thank you bowl.
that's
and
under
what-
$50 I can do.
Actually, it's free.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
free. And what I just said is in there, so.
Well, that's
And it's
priceless.
signed on the bottom by all of
That is so
the,
amazing.
in clay, so you can't erase it, by all the members of the board.
Wow.
But Liz,
Thank
is
you,
it-
guys. I really appreciate that.
Elizabeth made that bowl, so.
What's that?
She made the bowl, so.
So free other than the electricity to fire my kiln.
Wow, thank you, Lisbeth. I had no idea. That's amazing.
Clever girl.
Well, what do you think? What do you think, what should an action plan be in the first year or so of the? Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
I don't know if I'm gonna get this all right, but I know in Framingham, the Eversource and
Yeah.
professor from, I think it's MIT, and she arranged with them and worked with them for a long time. And she got them to put heat pumps throughout the whole of Framingham. And now she says it can be done again, and she's working on it. And the way to go is to do heat pumps for the whole community, the whole
Yeah.
town,
Cheaper, I
the
guess.
whole
Whole amount at once.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could do that, I think we'd be in good shape because it's so expensive. And people are, you have to go down really deep if you want it to really work.
Yeah.
And, if we did it that way, I'd even pay more taxes to let something like that happen. I just think it's very worthwhile. And
Thank you for
so
mentioning
that was that. And, I don't know if there was something else I was gonna say too, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Zainab Mugabe and Audrey Schulman are the two brilliant women who started this network geothermal business. But it's not going to work, unfortunately, everywhere in Massachusetts. We've got to make sure that it works as much as possible. But some of the repositioning that I was talking about doing, I kind of referenced some setbacks that we might encounter. Some of these worthwhile experiments are going to turn out to be very valuable, but of limited application. It is true. In the Globe wrote a piece several days ago that Eversource's experiment in Framingham is going well, and I've been out there. But I've also been out to National Grid's demonstration in Lowell, and they just terminated it.
Oh, really?
This stuff, any new innovative product is very, very expensive. And there are all kinds of quibbles one could raise about the approach National Grid took to network geothermal and how it might have differed or did differ from Eversource. And it could also be, quite frankly, the National Grid, which controls more than 50% of the natural gas furnaces in the state, had less motivation to succeed because Eversource is largely an electric company. And Eversource is going to make an incredible bundle as we all go all electric on everything. National Grid is a gas company, much more than Eversource is. They both do both, but relatively speaking, National Grid's dollars are more invested in gas than on electric. For example, National Grid provides all the natural gas to the city of Boston, so, which is a huge, out here, National Grid gives us gas too, but it's got Boston. Maybe it doesn't want to charge into the future as exuberantly as Eversource wants to. For whatever, I don't know, for whatever reason, one of our two major partners has quietly, very quietly, terminated its work. So we have to figure out why it works for Eversource and not for National Grid, and then we have to continue to problem solve. Networked heat pumps are going to have an important place. Heat pumps are going to be more important. I wish we could network them all together and realize some economies of scale. There seem to be some problems with the cost effectiveness of that, because getting these holes drilled 800, 900 feet, getting one of those boring equipment on your site, and your site could be a neighborhood, is very, very, very expensive. And sometimes you drill down and you find ledge. So you're not gonna be able to run the piping as deeply as you need to, and so it goes. But we can't be dissuaded by the bad news, but nor can we kind of refuse to absorb it, that's all.
Yeah, she did say one other thing.
Yeah.
She did say that they could still make money with it because a lot of it has to go through pipes, the water, the hot water. And so she said that just building all those pipes, they would still make a lot of money.
Right, well, no, believe me, I know their work extremely well. I've been working with them for 5 years now, and they are fantastic. They too must be a little disappointed in National Grid's decision. Fran?
Now, you mentioned the discounts for low and moderate income on utilities. So are they talking, and that's wonderful, I mean, you really
Yeah.
pushed that, and congratulations. But when they talk about discounts on utilities, is it gas or electric or both?
Yeah,
And
good
then just another quick question, is there any legislation being proposed to address, moving towards more low level EV chargers? Are we doing any legislation?
I think, we've got some real experts in the room with respect to EVs and charging. I'm an avid reader of Mark Sandine's column, which I noticed was no longer running
That's right.
in the Lexington Times, but which has informed us for years. The best stuff I've read on a lot of these things. Thank you, Mark. No, I don't think enough attention is being paid. But I want to talk about, and I made reference to that. I want to talk about the other issue, Fran, that you raised, because this is important. All of us have been reading these postmortems. Why did Trump win?
Yeah.
And there are some differences, but in the analyses, but clearly we're blowing it with working class people, middle class people, people who are making good livings, but not comfortable ones, and who still live closer to the bone in terms of their finances. Those folks are migrating toward Trump, and it isn't just white folks who don't have advanced degrees, it's also Latino folks and Black folks. The movement is there. There are many ways to slice and dice data, but one way to look at the data makes you realize that the movement toward Trump in Massachusetts was the 4th most pronounced movement. We started from a very low base. But, Fall River, blue-collar Fall River, Massachusetts, voted for Trump. An immigrant community, Portuguese American, Latino, significant additional votes for Trump. Actually, Mike Rodriguez, who's a great guy, the chair of the Senate's Budget Committee, represents 8 communities in southeastern Massachusetts. Every single one voted for Trump. That was not true in 2016, but it's true today. So there's something about people of more modest means who tend, not to live in significant numbers in this town, perhaps. They are angry. They are pissed. There's something about Trump that where he's channeling irritation that they feel about the state of the world, maybe, maybe about, more specifically about Democrats and national governance or local governance for that matter, I don't know. But I do know this, we've got to make sure that climate policy is reframed when it's intellectually honest to do it as policies that help working people and middle class people.
It's obvious.
The thing that really gave our gas position legs in the Senate was when we started talking about how much it's going to cost you and me and everyone else in Massachusetts, middle class and working class and poor people included, if we build out 2 energy systems over the next 40 years. We've got to build out the electric system because everyone concedes that deep electrification, as long as it's clean, is fundamentally the answer to climate change. But the gas utilities, led by National Grid, I might add, and they were big players in negotiations this year on this bill that I was working on. The utilities also want us to build out their infrastructure with new stuff for the next 50 or 60 years, and they want you to pay for both. Our pitch, my pitch in the Senate was, look, if we're gonna ask you, and we are asking you, to pony up to electrify, and this, because innovation doesn't come cheap, it ultimately becomes affordable. In the beginning, it's a world of startups, lots of capital investment, you've got to pay for all of it, you're borrowing most of it from banks, eventually that translates into your electric bill. So electrifying isn't going to be inexpensive. We can't ask people, unless we're nuts, to also pay to build out an altogether spanking new natural gas delivery system when that infrastructure is going to stay on the ground way past 2050. And Dory Seavey, a brilliant economist here in Massachusetts, has done some calculations which scared the hell out of me. At the rate we're going, the so-called GSEP program, which is a gas replacement program, and whose origins were absolutely rational. They had to do with replacing all those obnoxious leaky pipes that we were familiar with in Lexington 10 years ago, and still to some point today, but things have gotten better. But here's her point. If you continue to replace gas infrastructure, we're going to be financing it until the year 2097. Essentially, the rest of the century, we're going to be charging people additional money on their gas bill because this stuff is amortized over 40 years or so. And the pipe isn't, the last bit of new pipe isn't scheduled to be put into the ground until about 2037. It will then have a 50-year life. So we've got to do something, or we are going to fuel a middle class, working class rebellion against the clean energy enterprise, right? Because the right will manage to blame us. And there is a sense in which this stuff does get pricey. So it's our job to be very price conscious and to really be about giving people a break. And it's not just poor people, although we have to start there. It actually, remember, it's the working class and the middle class that voted Trump into office. And so if we don't want to see that happen in Massachusetts, and if we want to make sure it doesn't happen again in 2028 when we're next electing a president, we've got to be, the climate movement has to be the force that brings people relief on their monthly bills. And that is a focus, and I hope we can keep that up. Cindy?
Thank you. No, I want to thank you for bringing up bills and for lower income and middle income. Maggie and I and a few others with LexCAN have been working. Did you know that your electric bill, if you meet income limits, you get a 42% discount. You get a 25% discount on your gas bill. It makes sense for low income people to be electrified. The Mass Save program, we hope it continues the way it does. We've had some issues sort of getting that low income help really from them and have been pushing them. But low income and even middle income, there are more discounts than what, or more rebates than what Mass Save has. So it really, it's people just, you just have to pay attention. We have that there. We have to make sure it stays there, right?
Yeah.
We have it there. And so I thank you for talking about how not only do we have to get people into housing, low and middle income people into housing, but they have to be in housing that's healthy, not burning stuff, and with lower costs. But that wasn't my question. That's not why I raised my hand. So focusing on the next legislative session, you may have heard about this, but I work with Zero Carbon MA, who, you know, Lexington, we've all done great work, and thanks to you as well for being a fossil fuel free community, right, being part of that program, DOER's program. But there's only 10 communities.
Oh, what was that?
There's only 10 communities allowed in it.
Right, yeah.
And there's more than 10 communities that want to be in it. And so there's talk about, there's been some work with Zero Carbon MA, a lot of people trying to expand that to other communities. Somerville had their ducks all lined up, ready to go, and they couldn't get in. There's more communities like that. So what's your sense of whether we can get that through, expanding that?
Yeah. I think it's very important to push for it, Cindy. The odds today are very low. I know because I tried to expand it myself in this climate bill only to 11. Seemed like a achievable goal, 10, 11. And that's because Northampton and Somerville both wanted in, and there were 9 commitments, Lexington included. We had 11 towns who had gone through the entire exercise. So I did boldly. Who says I'm not a brave leader? I said 10 is not enough. How about 11? And it did not fly. My House counterpart went ballistic at the idea of the big fat 11.
Oh my God.
So
We
we've
have
got
work to do in the House, is what you're saying.
What's that?
We have work to do in the House.
Yes, you have a lot of work to do in the House, but it has to start. And by the way, this stuff has a way of changing quickly. There's nothing sacred or logical about 10. So of course they could afford to give us another 5, another 10. It would be no skin off their backs. And so because they don't really have a reasoned opposition, it's really just screw you. We have a shot at changing their minds. Yes, hi.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for your inspirational leadership. 2 quick plugs based on comments you made. One was in terms of pivoting to solar. I first got into solar with the 2014 Solarize Lexington program. I thought it was fantastic. You know, pre-qualify a vendor, you know what your price is going to be. You cut out all that work for the homeowner. And I know like it was over 100 homes that went into that program, and I'm not quite sure if there's a plan to do something like that again. The second thing on the level 1 charging, just a quick story. When we went to pick up our EV almost 4 years ago, I was talking to the technician about how we were going to, do a level 2 here, charge it pretty quickly. And he said, hey, just try a level 1 for a couple of weeks and see if it works for you. We never looked back.
Good for you.
Almost 4 years, we've charged once in the greater Boston area outside of our home. Of course,
Wow.
on long road trips, we're charging, but
Yeah.
it's fine. Level 1 is fine. I think for most people, it works perfectly.
Yeah, we've
And there's no
really,
extra charge,
we've
right?
really,
There's nothing-
we've missed the messaging
Yeah.
on that. Thank you for mentioning that.
Oh.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, thank you. I had a question about the, where you were talking about letter writing and just as individuals who have the ability to write letters, send email, sometimes the thought process goes through my head is like, oh, well, you are already in favor of this. Do I really need to write the letters? Is there more to it than that? And
Well, I can
how-
tell you what I always said at the State House over the last year. Of course, everyone knew I was from a liberal district, but first thing I would say is they're kicking the shit out of me. Just to bring home to them that the fact that I had a liberal district didn't mean I was comfortable. Here's the other weird thing about politics that I've learned to my bitter, through harsh experience. Politicians hate people who act on principle. It's deeply annoying. Because that's a rebuke. So I'm thinking of several members of the Senate who are deeply principled, and they don't get any response because everybody in elective office feels that she is principled. So you have to say, it's somewhat counterintuitive maybe, you have to say, this has nothing to do with principle. They are kicking the shit out of me. Or basically, I really need this. I really need this. I'm gonna get hurt in my district if I don't get fill in the blank, and the Hanscom language, for example. Now, and so if you realize that, you know, that's why Jimmy Carter had such difficulty, they say. I love Jimmy Carter, but he had such difficulty during his presidency. He was clearly a man of principle. That is detestable if you're also a politician because of the implied statement about you. So it's much more disarming to say, to basically to be a Paul and to say, I'm not, in so many words, you don't have to be blatant about it. I'm not doing this because of any profound convictions. I'm doing it because the grassroots are going to hurt me if I don't. You guys need to make that statement true. And by extension, all of Massachusetts on the grassroots needs to make it true. You can be nice to me. Fundamentally, there's an implied threat there. And when a politician can communicate that believably to a House Speaker or to a Senate President, that pays dividends. Principle ain't worth diddly.
So our letter just
I'm
needs to
exaggerating a little
say,
bit.
I will not vote for you if you do not do X.
Well, you can be explicit about it, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's not, I'm dramatizing this a little bit, but you get my.
I'm just trying to make it easy for everyone.
Yeah, hi, there are two of you there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so changing the subject a bit, you mentioned about the necessity of pivoting more to solar. And we have neighbors here in Lexington that spent about 5 years trying to get solar on their roof. And there were all kinds of barriers. So it's the prospects of getting solar adopted more, you know, it is atrocious to me that more people don't have solar on the roofs. But it feels like that these barriers need to be addressed. But one of the big ones was that Eversource, it was impossible to get hooked into their system. And you mentioned about the failure of the Lowell program, that maybe the company, because they mostly make their money from gas, was not incentivized. And so is there something going on where neither of these companies, National Grid or Eversource, are really incentivized to help people solarize?
Well, it's a good question. We're aware of the problem, and we're doing more. In this 2024 climate bill, we redefined what a gas company is. Until several months ago, a gas company sold fossil fuel gas and only fossil fuel gas. We've literally went into the definition of gas company and added phrasing to the effect that they can also sell network geothermal. So we're trying to point them toward the new business, which is why National Grid's, who knew that amendment was coming, National Grid's retreat nevertheless is disquieting to me. But we want to make it in their interest to be different kinds of energy companies. Now, I'll say with regard to solar, for example, or clean energy in general, you know, that's what the so-called RPS program is. We make these utilities buy an increasing percentage, for the moment at least, every year of their total energy supply from clean sources. It's up to about, they've got to procure it, and they can only buy it from solar generators, offshore wind. Nuclear now does qualify, but even that's new. There are a few hydro qualifies. So they have to go out and buy it, whether they want to or not. I'm just reassuring you, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to force the issue and create the market. And part of that is because utilities are totally under the power of the state. Eversource and National Grid, at least their Massachusetts divisions, aren't like oil and gas companies in Texas. They are totally under the thumb of state rather than federal regulators for the most part. And we can tell them, you're going to have to change the mix of fuels you buy, and they will do it. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can continue to get the utilities to change. But National Grid is a UK company. They started out taking gas out of the North Sea. Their legacy is in fossil fuels. Their commitment here is more gas than electric, as I mentioned, so they'll make less when we electrify, although they'll make plenty. We'll keep at it, but thank you for the question. Yes.
Hi, thanks for being here. So, as Ricky mentioned, one of the things we can do to take climate action is walk, bike, and take transit more. And I could, of course, agree with that. However, in Lexington, we have less than half the amount of MBTA bus routes today that we had 40 years ago. We also have less than half the amount of express bus routes that we had 40 years ago. So we not only need to stabilize the transit funding for the MBTA and other services, but we also have to expand transit. So I'm wondering what you and your legislators might do about that in this upcoming session. I do know the governor's transportation funding task force just issued the report today. I haven't read it, but I am curious what you all are thinking of.
We've got to pony up. You know, it's an $800 million annual deficit. And we've got operating deficit, I mean, not capital. And so we have to find revenue sources. The millionaire's tax, which has been largely focused on public education, very important, does have to more evenly fund transportation as well. That legally, it can be education or transportation, the proceeds of the millionaire's tax, so-called. So we've got to move it a little bit more toward the education, the transportation piece. My wife takes the T-bus on Bedford Street Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday into Alewife every single week. She works in downtown Boston, then she takes the Red Line to work. So she texts me every morning. Every morning after she's left, she texts me and says, the bus is 5 minutes late. Then the next day, the bus is 10 minutes. Then the third day, thank God, the bus was on time. So I'm extremely focused on more bus service for Lexington. Very active constituent, and we have to. We're going to have to meet that deficit with funds that we don't extract out of the passengers. Although I'll be honest with you, none of these trade-offs is easy. They're all suboptimal. So I do not support Mayor Wu's all-free bus stuff. I think everyone should pay something. In poor neighborhoods, it should be very little, but we can't afford free. I wish we could. So there's an instance where I think, as I say, the choices are suboptimal and all of us have to pay something. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you how we could help you with this Lexington airport. Could we write letters or what can we do?
Well, you've done a lot. You've created a major migraine for Massport, so thank you for that. But it's unclear what's going to happen.
I have an answer.
Okay, Mark, yeah.
On January 28th, the Hanscom Area Towns Committee is having a meeting, and Rich Davey is going to be presenting on the future of Massport and the future of Hanscom at that meeting. So
that would
it's a publicly
right.
posted meeting. You can find it on the town website. Tuesday, January 28th at 7 p.m.
Where?
Online. It's all remote. So it's a Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Mark. I think that I think we may lose that one, but we could win too. I think because we can't legally, if they want to play hardball, we can't stop them. They have the votes. Charlie Baker's board of directors. A new governor only gets an appointment periodically as terms expire on a rolling basis. So these are the folks who decided they liked Hanscom Jets in the first place are still in power. The new governor obviously can exert some leverage, and she is through her Secretary of Environmental Affairs, who lives here in Lexington. That's why they're back to the drawing boards and having to study the environmental implications of jets more than they had proposed to do in the first round, in the first EIR. So I think we can hurt them in the legislature. Rich Davey is coming tomorrow, and he's schlepping out to Lexington, which is good.
28th, January
28th, right? He's coming tomorrow to my office, I mean. Yeah. But I take your point. It would be nice if a number of us could show up on the 28th. I hope to be there too. he needs to feel that he's going to be branded as a client, and his agency is going to suffer such reputational damage that it's going to have ripple effects on all kinds of other things they want to do. Now, convincing him of that is difficult. We're halfway there. People in this town have done a great job, Concord, Bedford, Lincoln as well, and some other communities that are smarting under Massport's whip like Acton. And of course, then you've got the marine terminal. Remember, a lot of the pollution that takes place in South Boston because they have a very large port, not an airport, a marine port that itself is a source of enormous air quality degradation. So we have the chance. They used to say, Massport used to feel it was very clever. They successfully divided suburbs from cities for decades. And they would tell East Boston, those rich sons of bitches in Lexington, Lincoln, Concord, and Bedford don't want to do their fair share. They want you to absorb all the air traffic. While they sit there with a few putt-putts irritating them on a Saturday morning. We've managed to turn that around. We're talking to those. Earlier this week, I met with the head of the Citizens Advisory Committee that's existed for decades to Massport. They're radicalizing. They're very pleased at the change in the charter. They're beginning to see that maybe Massport can be forced to back down because the political ramifications long-term now are substantial enough. So we have to keep it up, show up on the 28th, very important. And I have to deliver a message tomorrow to Rich, who I knew a little bit from the Deval Patrick early Charlie Baker days, not a bad guy, but working for a bad organization.
So where is that one gonna be on the 28th?
On Zoom. Well,
It's remote.
we'll send out a,
Yeah.
how do you show up?
Okay, good. Watch your inbox.
Thank you, Senator, for your leadership. I had a question. I am not a homeowner. I am a tenant in the town.
Yeah.
One of the things I have noticed is that, as you were mentioning at the beginning about the weatherization of the buildings, so that involves a capital cost. And those who are the builders or the management are not really willing to take up that cost. And it's the tenants who pay the utility bills. So there is a huge disconnect between what the tenants pay as utility bills and the weatherization, which involves a capital cost, which needs to be taken up by the management. And I do some work, and I know this weatherization is actually a very low-lying fruit in the world of climate change, because if you improve your energy efficiency, you tend to actually save a lot of energy. I have tried, but it's kind of difficult. I live in an apartment, so I know how inefficient the energy system is. So is there a way something can be done about it or anything from the climate?
It's a great question, thank you. Mass Save is pivoting to deal with the landlord-tenant question. The immediate problem is that it's a very decentralized world, isn't it? There are lots of landlords, and they're gonna get the message at different points, and some are gonna be more responsive than others. Some major landlords in Boston are realizing that financially, Mass Save is making it easier for them to weatherize units in which the tenant pays the monthly utility bill. So to your point, the landlord might be impervious, but there are lots of landlords, because it's such a huge universe of owners, who want to do the right thing if it's not incredibly expensive to do it. They also increasingly want to advertise their units as being energy efficient, because that makes sense for the tenants. So we need to give them positive incentives, but we also need to, again, sort of create an expectation on the part of tenants that a weatherized building is going to cost them less on a monthly basis. So they should start to ask landlords, have you taken advantage of these incentives we hear the state is offering? We're going to focus a lot more on landlords than we have in the past. Mass Save has a new 3-year plan that's under review, but the landlord-tenant issue is, for the first time, is really in focus, I'm pleased to say. So, great question.
It's just about 8:30. I don't want to keep you much longer. I see one hand up, and why don't we take one last question? And then I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you, Senator Barrett. You are an inspiration for us. It's exciting that you can come here on the heels of passing a climate bill.
Yes, it is. It could have been embarrassing.
But we can, I've heard some ideas that have been generated here tonight on things maybe to work on another solarize, how to get through to landlords and things like that, and we'll continue to talk.
And let's keep going on Massport. Keep pressing on Massport. That's important.
So we'll take one last question and then you all can have something
Thank
to
you.
eat, put your ideas up there for us, and thanks Senator Barrett.
Thank you, Ricky.
All right, so my question is, have you given any thought to putting tolls on all the access roads to Boston and using that money for public transportation?
Ricky, I haven't. Have you?
New York surge pricing is sort of a hot topic at the moment.
It's the roads are free.
So what's the idea again?
Tolls on all the roads going into Boston?
Solar on all the roads.
For the cars.
That's what I thought I heard you say.
Like $10 or so.
Oh, a congestion.
Let me bring that back. I want to thank you guys so much for this. I really do appreciate the encouragement, but I want you to know the admiration's mutual. There wouldn't have been a bill without you guys, so thank you very much.
It's exhausting.
Three bills.
What do you